Okay, before I lay out my grind lines and all that, I want to determine the location of this guard, and that's more or less done by eye. So I'm just getting my angles set. There are no square lines I can square off of and strike this. So what I do is I just put this. It's a filing jig, but this is hardened O1 steel. I use it for a lot of things. So I just have it lightly clamped on the blade blank right now. And I'm just setting that on there, and I'm backing up. Just kind of taking a look, and just when it seems good this way, and when I have enough free area here. Alright, so I kind of like that placement. So I'm just going to take and tighten this clamp. So now to locate this jig, scribe a pretty good line there. That also designates where my taper starts. Now this knife is going to have a pretty nice tang taper going back to the butt of the knife. The blade's going to lose a lot of weight from here forward. My cutting edge is going to start right here, where that little curve in is. So now I'm going to take this out of the vise to where that will stay up there on its own, and I'm going to look at it for a little bit before I drill any holes and set it in stone, so to speak. Okay, so at this point I just take it out of the vise. I just look at it. I just want to make sure that it seems, quote, square to everything, and that it's not tilted one way or the other. And if it is, then I will just lock it back in the vise and just tap one side of this down, because I don't have it locked that tightly yet. And then the permanent line I move over. Now if you notice, I'm doing this on what I call the off side of the knife. But when I like it, I'm going to flip it around, and I will scribe a good line on this side of the knife. All my layout is referenced on the logo side of the knife. So any lines I make or anything like that on this side can just be touched to the belt grinder and ground away, because this is not down to finished dimension yet. Let's see, I can turn this over and get the bluing out of my eye. Just kind of look at that. You know, to me that looks pretty nice. So that's what I'm going to go with. Alright, so I'm going to lock it back in there, and I'm going to scribe a permanent line. Then we'll get to laying out our cutting edge and our tang taper. Okay, so I got the guard situated basically where I like it. There's a backlight from that window. I apologize for that. So now I just have it clamped. I already have my holes center punched, and now I'm going to start working on that blade in earnest. I'm going to go ahead and get my grinds. I have scribed a good line where this jig is, so I can take the guard back off. Then I'm not drilling any holes until I have tapered my tang, and then I'm going to slot this, and I'm going to start working it up this taper. This taper's coming up, and then this is going to taper. And my aim is the area where the guard sits, that's going to be flat. And the flat's going to extend, just about to where the plunge cut is for our bevel. And that's going to be the only parallel area on the knife when I'm finished. So it's just going to be slow fitting after we get our tang taper to bring this up slowly and file slowly till we get it right on our scribe line. That's when we're going to reclamp, and then we will drill our locator holes. All of that's going to be done before we heat treat. And then for this knife and this style of construction, what I'm going to do is, after I get this up to where it needs to be with the slot, and this is polished to finish polish and everything is ready for heat treatment, when I actually go to heat treat this knife, I don't want to lose any dimension to decarb that I have to grind off. So this blade is going to get foil wrapped before heat treatment, so it comes out nice and clean, and you'll see what I'm talking about, versus the normal oily, scaly knives I pull out of the oil when I don't do this style guard. And when we pop it out of the foil, you'll see why I did that. That way, all I have to do is attach the guard with my peening process. But my aim is to have a slot in here for this to come up, and I want to try to make it appear to be seamless. You just want a good fit. And then what I'll do after everything is in place, this is going to get soldered, and the solder is just to fill any gaps that moisture can get into and begin corroding the blade where Pat won't be able to get oil into it. So that's why we solder seal them after everything is together. So now we're going to start getting this to finish grind, nice and polished, and then we're going to lay out and grind our bevels and our tapered tang, one step at a time. Okay, I've set my height gauge for where I want my cutting edge guide to be. So twin little lines, hope that shows up in the camera, but everything on either side of those lines goes away. So now I'm going to, this is 100,000, or I'm sorry, 200 thousandths thick. So it's still a little bit proud of 3/16, which again is fine with me. So I'm going to reset this height gauge. Good old vernier scale, you gotta love them. Nobody likes these, that's why I got this height gauge cheap. So I want a center line right here, and this is going to give me a reference when I go to cut my false edge on this with my files. Now the tang taper. So we have 200 thousandths steel, and I want to reduce the thickness from here to here by roughly, I'm going to end up being about a third as wide as it is here, or as thick. So let me set the height gauge for that and be right back. Okay, I got interrupted by a text message on my phone. There's some people, married couple out in, I don't know if they're in Colorado, Montana, something like that, but they sell elk antler. And they sent me a picture of the antler they had in mind for me, because I'm ordering more of it. Now that beam that I showed at the start of the video was an elk antler shed, and this is a shed too. The only difference between the one on my bench and the one he sent me a picture of is the one on my bench came by me. A fella traded that to me quite some time ago to make his boys a couple of simple knives, and I did that. But it was from a drop-off that had kind of laid out in the sun and bleached a lot of the color out of it. And the ones, these folks over, the ones that just texted me, the ones I found online, they kind of go out there and they get them in the spring, and they know where to look, where these herds go, and they get them before the rodents can get to them and chew them up, and two, they get them before the sun can, and the elements can bleach the color out. So he sent me a picture of a beautiful, let me show you. It has the nice amber color still in it. Let's see if I can show this to you on the video. So I just ordered this, Get around here so I can see if you can see what I'm talking about. I don't know how well this is going to show up, but that, I really like that deep amber color. I don't have much use for that crown down there, maybe a belt buckle or something, but look at the nice color. That has a lot more color than the one I have. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to proceed with the construction of the knife. This thing is 40 inches long. He's going to cut it down into usable about 18-inch pieces for me for the shipping. But yeah, that's a lot of nice amber color in that. You can put that color back, well, with some alcohol-based dyes and leather dyes, but I'd rather just have the natural color. So Pat, I'm going to wait till this thing, it should be shipping today. So I'm going to wait for this to come in, and then by the time it's here, I'll be ready to start handling this thing anyway. Because I'm going to get 2 or 3 knives ready for heat treatment between now and when your knife goes in. But yeah, I should be able, that is 2 inches wide. So that's a big piece of antler. There's a lot of knife handles in that. But anyway, I would rather wait and get this so I can select some really, really nice scales. So I wanted to show you guys that. So anyway, now we're ready to lay out the taper for the tang. Let me put this bone down. And 200 thousandths thick on the steel. I want to reduce the thickness to roughly a third there, you know, give or take. So I've set my height gauge for 60 thousandths. And I'm going to scribe 2 lines and see where that leaves me. Yeah, that'll be a nice taper. I don't know if you can see that or not from the backlight of the window, but that is going to make a nice taper and not reduce the weight back here too light. I don't know what kind of situation Pat might get into with this thing, so I want it to be, you know, like a extension of his hand. I want it to balance. So anyway, we're going to go ahead. I've drilled the hole for the taper of the tang. That is simply for my push stick. And I've got my line scribed, and I've got one face of this almost polished down to where that's going to be finished. And polishing from this point, and I measured, it was, 204 thousandths. And so it's 200 now that I've taken it this one side down, so I'm not going to lose much in the thickness. But I'm ready to start grinding. So that's what I'm going to do next. So I will show you little stages of the grind as it progresses. And I believe I'm going to work my bevels first and then taper my tang. It really doesn't matter what order you do them in. But I'm eager to get started on this, so I'm going to go ahead and do that. And I will show you guys the knife after it's been ground on for a little bit. Time to check my camera battery. Alright.
I don't know how well you've been able to see what I'm doing. Let me zoom out here. Okay, so what I'm doing is, this is hogging off a lot of this metal. And here I'm about 2/3 to touching my layout line, give or take. I'm about 2/3 this way too, and that's what you want to do. Is you just want to kind of want to get your angle to where you arrive at both points at the same time. Now this is a pretty rough 50 grit belt, and I'm not going to get too much closer to either finish line at this grit. I'm going to switch to 80s, and then I will approach the layout lines and hit those with no finer than 220 and probably 320. That way, when we get into the finish grades and get this up to polish, there aren't going to be any of these deep scratches to contend with. And remember, we hand sand to at a point we begin hand sanding, and we don't want these transverse notches in this knife. But I've been at it for about 10 minutes. And if you're doing this, of course, it's going to get hot. You need to have a dunk tank right here. And this is messy. But so what this does, this is hardened steel again, but what it does is keeps me from making a mistake, getting back in here too far. It's important. So I'm getting ready to flop over to the other side and grind that one. But one important thing is when you're doing this, and if you get fatigued, stop, rest, come back, because if you're tired, you're going to make a mistake. You're going to do like this or that. You want even pressure with both hands going across, and that's why you see me dunking frequently. When it gets a little too uncomfortable in my fingers, then I might not press as hard, and this hand might win the fight, and then I'm digging a hole here. So you want to avoid that, especially on a very nice long blade like this. An imperfection like that will glare like a sore thumb, and it's a lot of work to get those out. So rest often, dunk frequently, and take your time. I'm not in a rush on this knife, and I'm having fun with it. So I will come back a little bit closer to what the 320 grit will look like, and you'll see this knife without this on the piece, and you'll start to see what it looks like. And then we taper the tank.